While typically viewed as a relatively contained regional conflict, the American Civil War came perilously close to escalating into a far wider, truly global confrontation of epic proportions. What would have happened if the Civil War had turned into a world war? While this scenario might seem far-fetched, all of the major world powers at the time, including Britain, France, Spain, and Russia, all had significant territorial, economic, and geopolitical interests and motivations vested in the war's outcome that could have pulled them into directly intervening on one side or the other. In the lead-up to the Civil War, tensions were rising between the rival powers of Britain and Russia over establishing dominance in Europe and Asia. Russia had been crippled after its defeat in the Crimean War by Britain and France, leaving it embittered and seeking allies to challenge Western imperialism. Prussia, focused on its ambitions of unifying the German states under its rule, saw value in cultivating Russia as a reliable non-aggressor that would allow its expansion unhindered by other major powers. Russia looked to the United States as a potentially friendly partner and counterweight to British power. As another vast land-based empire of European heritage often left out of European affairs, Russia believed few other nations seemed as capable of challenging Britain's global hegemony in the way the industrializing US had historically proven itself willing and able to do. It was for this reason that in 1863, Russia sent its naval fleets to American ports to protect Union territories and provide crucial support. Russian ships occupied space in both New York and San Francisco for a time to help protect from British or French invasions. While Russia actually showed support for the Union cause by stationing part of its fleet protectively in America, both the British and the French would have been more likely to aid the South. Britain and France's economies depended heavily on the flow of cotton from the American South, giving them powerful motivations to sympathize with and potentially support Confederate independence, which could tighten European control over trade and resources in North America. The Confederacy welcomed the prospect of European military backing to help achieve victory, while the Union opposed French invasion and occupation of Mexico, threatening war against any power that recognized the rebel government. Tensions over foreign intervention in the Civil War nearly boiled over into open conflict after the Trent Affair in late 1861, when the Union Navy illegally seized 2 Confederate diplomats from a British merchant ship. Britain came exceptionally close to declaring outright war on the Union in retaliation, making plans for a dual-front invasion by seizing New England in the east and the virtually undefended California-Oregon territories in the west to use as a bargaining chip if the Union successfully occupied Canada. Had Britain opted to follow through on its readied invasion plans after being provoked by the Trent Affair, it could have quickly ignited a massive global conflagration. France, allied with Britain, would likely have quickly joined their side. Russia, having already lent its fleet to the Union, would have thrown even more support and troops into the conflict to back the Union against European intervention. Just these 3 commitments could have quickly escalated into multiple other nations joining the war. At the time, Russia was allied with both Prussia and Italy. Britain and France would have in turn involved their allies, Austria and the Ottoman Empire. Both sides could potentially launch invasions of each other's colonies across multiple continents in Asia, Africa, and the Americas. With so many European nations involved, not only would colonies have been involved, but fighting in Europe could have exploded as well. While we don't know what might have happened in the rest of the world had more nations joined the fight, the English had well laid out plans that they would have tried to execute. The plans centered around a multi-front invasion and invasion campaign, aiming to seize New England through Massachusetts and upstate New York, while another force captured California, Oregon, and Washington Territory on the Pacific. This Western Front was viewed as particularly important, as Britain assessed the Union would be unable to effectively defend the Pacific coast. Russia's naval presence protecting the West was therefore crucial to maintaining the Union's territorial integrity. Meanwhile, France's invasion and establishment of a client monarchy in Mexico gave it a foothold to potentially expand further into North America should the Confederacy achieve independence, a major motivation for weighing possible military intervention. The French may have also demanded the return of New Orleans, looking to regain the important port that they sold to the United States during the Louisiana Purchase 50 years earlier. While we haven't mentioned them yet, Spain could easily have joined the South as well. Spain's renewed colonial aggression, including the reoccupation of the Dominican Republic, had already shown a willingness to reassert imperial ambitions in the Americas if the circumstances allowed. They had so much territory in Central America and Mexico that it would have been easy and beneficial for them to throw their hat in the ring with the South. With the great powers of Europe and their colonial interests potentially becoming deeply entangled, the once localized American Civil War could rapidly metastasize into a series of interconnected conflicts spanning the globe. Russia may threaten to invade Ottoman and Austrian territories, forcing France and Britain to divert resources away from America to defend their beleaguered allies, and allowing the Union to regain ground and potentially launch an offensive into Canada. In this hypothetical scenario of foreign intervention, the Union may ultimately have been forced to accept Confederate independence on harsh terms to end the war and stem external aggression, with some territories ceded to create a Pacific Republic under British domination. The European balance of power would be thrown into complete upheaval, with boundaries redrawn, alliances dramatically realigned, and an intensely destabilized world order for decades to come. The snowball that would have occurred after a world war in the 1860s is also interesting. The loss of life and scale of this war, which would likely have been fought not only in America, but in Europe, North Africa, and even into Asia, could have incentivized governments worldwide to avoid such huge conflicts going forward. If a horrible worldwide war had been fought in the 1860s, would the wars that marked the 20th century have happened? The historically plausible potential for military intervention by multiple global powers shows just how easily the Civil War could have escalated from a horrific internal conflict into a cataclysmic worldwide struggle between the great powers over half a century before World War I in our timeline. The world that could have emerged from such a nightmarish scenario would be almost unrecognizable compared to what we know, underscoring just how delicately balanced the entire period was, with tensions erratically flaring and shifting between powers constantly. The fact full-scale foreign intervention was narrowly avoided highlights how much more devastatingly calamitous the 19th century could have been. What historical event would you like to see turned into a what-if scenario? Leave your ideas along with discussions for this video in the comments section.